It's snowing in Bloomington, and it's baseball season, which must mean it's mid-February. Welcome to IU Sports Sunday. I'm Nick Rodecap. My co-host, Ben Haller, he is with the Indiana baseball team, and they have gotten off to a rocky start down in Surprise, Arizona. The season starting may have come as a surprise to members of the offensive side of the baseball. We'll get into that and plenty more here over the next couple hours. Got to say, I woke up to snow outside my window, and a lot of it. I spent about 10 minutes cleaning off my car. So that's a one way to start your Sunday. It means that there's still, I guess, time in the IU basketball season, although that might be more of a threat rather than a promise for hope. Indiana men's basketball is basically done. I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but after yet another gut-wrenching loss at home in a winnable game, the Hoosiers are basically out of NCAA tournament contention, barring a miracle of biblical proportions. The men have a week off. They do not play until next Sunday, February 23rd, against Purdue. Purdue has lost a couple games, which you might think is a good thing, but I think it's a bad thing because that means that Purdue is going to be really angry when they come into Bloomington next weekend. We'll talk about a lot over the next couple hours. We'll talk IU basketball, IU women's basketball, baseball, and softball, and I believe IU softball is still on a winning streak. It was, 8 games in a row. Since they dropped the season opener by just one run, they've been rolling and rolling and rolling. So IU softball off to a hot start, which is good. Indiana baseball is not. Indiana women's basketball defeated Purdue yesterday. They didn't just beat Purdue. They beat the snot out of Purdue. That one, 78-56 at Assembly Hall. Much more decisive and a much better result for Indiana fans than the game that took place just a few hours before on Friday night when Indiana fell to UCLA. And Indiana, while losing that game, wore the ugliest uniforms I have ever seen. And I tweeted about the uniforms that Adidas put out for this year's Black History Month. And I said, hey, just go back to the ones Indiana had about 3 years ago, where they were like more of a floral theme, I guess. They were the traditional home whites modified with a cream backdrop and then some floral accents. There was some pink in there, some blue. It was decent looking. It didn't look great. It didn't look like the normal jerseys, sure. So you could say that they looked worse than that if you're more of a traditionalist, but they definitely looked better than whatever garbage Adidas put out this year, which isn't just despised by Indiana fans, but also by Texas A&M fans and I think Kansas fans too. Basically, any Adidas school with a decent basketball program, decent is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for Indiana, but any school with a notable basketball program, not exactly going to be looking at Adidas very favorably anytime in the near future. The jerseys Indiana wore were red with orange and black accents. On the top corner, you had the IU logo, and on the bottom, and the opposite bottom corner, you had the number. You also had the number players' numerals on the shorts as well. They looked like a practice jerseys or jerseys that you would see kids in the Greek Basketball Association wear for a Wednesday night game between Beta Sigma Psi and Pi Kappa Psi. It really just looked awful. Just awful. The product on the court was not any better. Indiana lost to UCLA 72-68 on Friday night. UCLA entered this game as basically the best defensive team in the Big Ten. They certainly lived up to that billing against Indiana in Bloomington in the Eastern time zone where they hadn't won a game all season, but you get adjusted to it by coming over and playing Illinois. It gets you in the ballpark anyway. Kept Illinois close, but couldn't close the deal for UCLA. Actually, they made a run late in that game. They were down 16. They lost 5. I think they lost by 5. Against Indiana, though, they looked a lot better. Indiana was 0 of its first 7 from three-point range. They didn't make a three-point field goal until about 15 minutes into the first half when Trey Galloway knocked one down, and then, of all people, Kanan Carlisle made one. And if Kanan Carlisle has to shoot threes, then you know your offense is pretty much dead in the water. Indiana now on the season is, like I said, basically out of the NCAA tournament conversation, 15-11, 6-9 in Big Ten play. I want to flash back to last season where Indiana, that was seen as kind of a lost season as well. Indiana 10-10 in Big Ten play. Indiana right now is 6-9. You think back to that roster from last season, there was nowhere near as much raw talent on it as there is this year. Yet, there's a chance that Indiana could not only end up with a similar record to last year, they could end up with a worse record than last year. Yeah, it's probably best that Mike Woodson was allowed to step down because he would be getting fired at season's end. I don't think that that's a shocker. I don't think that's rocket science to anybody. But wow. I mean, we've gotten to that point now where you're looking at a possibility of having a worse record than a season last year where your starting point guard got hurt, and Xavier Johnson got hurt about halfway through the season and was never the same. So you had to either play a freshman or you had to play Trey Galloway as a point guard. And ironically, Trey Galloway is now a better option than Miles Rice at point guard, which I didn't think anybody would expect to see at the start of the season. You think back to Indiana versus Tennessee, that exhibition. Yes, it's an exhibition, but Miles Rice actually looked like he was good at basketball. And he deceived me and everyone else. Indiana just could not close the deal against UCLA. I think they led early. There were technically 3 lead changes. I was there. I was calling the game for WIUX, which is IU student radio station. I don't know that it ever felt like Indiana actually led. Okay, so they led once at the start of the game when Umar Ballo made 2 free throws. They led 2-0. They led 6-3. They led 6-3, and then after that, UCLA took the lead and never gave it back. So Indiana's last lead was 8-7 at 16:48 left in the first half. Or actually, it was 10-9, I should say. 10-9 at 15:49 left in the first half. And then UCLA takes a 12-10 lead, and they led for the final 33 minutes of the game. So that's why it felt like they never led. But, I mean, it was just, one of those things where, kind of like the Maryland and Michigan games for Indiana men's basketball, where on the scoreboard it felt like they were in it. It felt like they had a chance, but if you were watching the game, if you were in the arena, especially with UCLA last night, or 2 nights ago, I guess it was, every single time that Indiana tried to fight back, UCLA had an answer. Whether it was making a tough 3 in transition, driving to the hoop, getting fouled, whatever it was, UCLA had a response to Indiana. Every single time, the Hoosiers got the crowd into it, got the fans on their feet, got Assembly Hall rocking again, UCLA responded. And that is really, really difficult to do, especially when you're coming off of a loss just a couple days prior against Illinois. You've got to come to Assembly Hall, known for being loud. And it was loud at some points on Friday night, mostly in the second half, because Indiana trailed by 10 going into halftime. But Indiana just could not rally and actually take the lead back. Again, UCLA led for the final 33 minutes of that game. And again, down the stretch for Indiana, it was like watching Groundhog Day. It was like just the same movie on loop over and over and over again now. This is the 4th or 5th time probably we've seen this where Indiana has a chance late and they just forget how to play basketball. And again, a lot of it, I think, came back to Miles Rice, who I don't think should ever be on the floor in crunch time ever again. But maybe there's some clause in his NIL deal that says he has to play the final 2 minutes of every game. That I don't know. That's the only reasonable explanation I can give for this, is that for some reason Miles Rice is contractually obligated to play in crunch time because he does not look sound on the floor. His shot selection is awful. His decision-making as a whole is terrible. He would rather pass up an open 3 for a contested long 2 or a baseline fadeaway. Just impossible shots in a situation where you need shots to fall. That's just not something that you can have from the guy who was supposed to be your starting point guard but has now been benched for Trey Galloway. Trey Galloway, who was, your 3rd option at point guard last year? Okay, maybe 2nd if you're not counting Gabe Cupps. Yikes. Just yikes all around. Miles Rice, first team all-cardio yet again on Friday night. 24 minutes off the bench for him. 5 points, 3 rebounds on 2 of 8 shooting, which again speaks to his awful shot selection. Kanan Carlisle had 3 points in 4 minutes. So Carlisle, 2 fewer points than Rice in 20 fewer minutes on the floor. Bryson Tucker did not attempt a shot all zeros on the stat sheet in 5 minutes for him. Indiana basically has no bench outside Malik Reneau at this point. Just nothing. Nothing in the way of depth. UCLA, on the other hand, against Indiana, they had a lot of different guys on the stat sheet. I'm actually going to have to count them. 6, 7, 8, 9 different scorers, all of whom scored at least 5 points. Except for William Kyle III. He had 5. He had 2. So UCLA actually had 10 different scorers, if you want to count William Kyle III. Indiana, by contrast, had 8 different scorers. UCLA spread the wealth. They had 3 guys in double figures. Leading the way was Tyler Bilodeau, who we thought might create a little bit of a matchup nightmare for Indiana men's basketball. He's a 6'9" forward who also can shoot from 3 on occasion. He makes his free throws, made all 5. 12 points, 5 boards, 3 assists for Bilodeau. Sky Clark, it's funny because he transferred to UCLA, and boom, he's back in the Big Ten. Of course, Clark began his career at Louisville, began his career at Illinois, did not play against Indiana when he was with the Illini. He left the program midseason, transferred to Louisville. Kenny Payne did Kenny Payne things, and Clark ended up at UCLA. Back in the Big Ten, he had 11 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. UCLA, very good from three-point range as a team. Indiana's defense as a whole was really bad. Really, really bad. UCLA, 45%, 9 of 20 from 3, 5 of 10 in the second half. They were really, really consistent, really balanced on offense. Indiana's defense had a lot of... I think they left a lot of shooters open. I'm just replaying this game in my head because whenever you broadcast a game, at least for me, you can remember more or less how the game played out just from having to pay attention to every single moment. It just felt like Indiana's defense was not very good. There were a lot of open threes, and Indiana had open looks on the offensive end, but they just could not score. They could not make a shot. The first 5 or 6 looks that Indiana had from three-point range were open looks, and they just missed. And they lost that game by 4 points. You never want to play the what-if game, but Indiana loses by 4. You miss 5 open threes. I think you can do the math. We'll talk more about Indiana men's basketball. If they can save their season, it's a big if. Much like SEC football in postseason conversations. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you on a snowy Sunday in B-Town. It's baseball season, and there's snow on the ground. If you were planning to come to Indiana baseball's home opener on Wednesday against Purdue Fort Wayne, which is probably a very small subset of people, I know, but if you were planning to attend that game, don't, because I don't think it's going to be played. The weather is frightful, to say the least. They usually don't play if it's below freezing. It's going to be 22 with snow in the morning between 3 and 5 inches. So I don't think we're going to have any baseball played that day. Next Tuesday we might, if the ground dries up in time. Indiana hosts Xavier in baseball on Tuesday. They played Xavier last night, and that game was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It was pure chaos, which is what most of college baseball tends to be, especially early in the season. So that was exciting. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but back to IU men's basketball. They are in the dumpster again. You thought maybe they would build some momentum after that upset win over Michigan State. It has become clear with time that more or less that game was won by Indiana due to probably an overwhelming desire for the Hoosiers not to allow Tom Izzo to break Bob Knight's record for wins in the Big Ten against Bob Knight's longtime team. Michigan State broke that record last night against Illinois, and Illinois did not score for the final 6 or so minutes of that game at least. They actually had -2 points because there was a goaltend that was overturned. So that's pretty funny. That was after Illinois retired Terrence Shannon Jr.'s jersey. Goodness gracious. Terrence Shannon Jr.'s jersey upside down and had to hang it in the rafters upside down because the game had to start. So that was probably a bad omen. And if you were betting on that game, you should have just taken Michigan State as soon as the jersey was unveiled upside down because that was really funny. Unfortunately, Indiana was not the beneficiary of that upside-down jersey when they played Illinois because they got blown out. Probably should have just given up on the team right there because now if you stayed invested in this team, you have not been rewarded. There is technically still a chance that Indiana can miss the Big Ten tournament. Indiana is stuck near the bottom of the conference, and there are so many teams on this standing page I actually have to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Indiana is In 11th place in the Big Ten, sole possession of 11th, at 6-9 in the conference, 15-11 overall. The cutoff to make the Big Ten tournament is 15th. So Indiana is 6-9 right now. Minnesota and Rutgers are tied at the cutoff spot, 5-9. Rutgers is a game below, or 2 games back on overall record, so it would be Rutgers making the Big Ten tournament in the final spot. Indiana beat Rutgers, Indiana beat Minnesota, Indiana did not beat Iowa. Those are the 3 teams below them and above the cut line for the Big Ten tournament. But there are 2 teams below the cut line that Indiana plays again before the season is over. Washington in Seattle and Penn State in Bloomington. So there is a possibility, there's technically a mathematical chance that Indiana could miss the Big Ten tournament, which is being played this year in Indianapolis at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And I think it would be really embarrassing for everyone involved, the players, the coaches. I'm not going to trash the managers because they're hardworking people. But the players, the coaches, Scott Dolson maybe, I don't know. It would be pretty embarrassing for Indiana men's basketball to miss the Big Ten tournament when it's being played an hour up the road in the capital of the state of Indiana. That's still a possibility. Indiana at this point has a few games left in the season. I haven't counted exactly how many. They all start to run together after a while. You've got 5 games left this season. 5 games. Beginning next Sunday, a week from today, against Purdue. That game is sold out. If you paid, I don't know. At this point, if you pay to go to Assembly Hall, I feel like I don't know if you deserve what happens, but you should not get your hopes up. I'll put it that way. Again, I've been on the WIUX sports broadcast for the last 3 Indiana home games. I feel like it's been the last 3. Yeah. For the last 3, Maryland, Michigan, and UCLA. And they all feel like they end the same way. Road team gets out to a hot start. They usually take a 10 to 12 point lead into the locker room. Indiana comes out, goes on this fake rally. The fans get behind them. Indiana can't hit timely shots. The opposing team does hit timely shots, whether it's from the floor or the free throw line. And Indiana is close, but never close enough. And even the last 2, we've even had a buzzer beater. Now, Luke Goody's layup got waved off, but there were buzzer-beating shots in the last 2 games that did not affect the end result. So that's pretty funny and also kind of sad because it means that, again, Indiana gets down the stretch and they don't know how to adjust. So you've got Purdue coming in next week. There's a lot that's going to change in the Big Ten over the next 7 days before this game starts. Purdue is kind of in a weird spot right now. I think they may have peaked too early. They've lost back-to-back games, including a loss at home yesterday to Wisconsin. Wisconsin was incredible in that game, especially in the second half. And they scored 94 points on Purdue. Now, Purdue scored 84, but they couldn't play defense, much like Indiana against UCLA. UCLA, a team that struggles scoring the basketball sometimes. Wisconsin hung 94 on Purdue at Mackey Arena. As a team, they were 12 of 30 from 3. In the second half, they were 72% from the field, 18 of 25. 18 of 25 at Mackey Arena for Wisconsin. That is incredible. I've been to Mackey this season. It is extremely loud. USC went in there last week, and they never had a prayer. They were rattled from the jump. Wisconsin, not so much. Wisconsin's a little better. Greg Gard's a little better as a coach than Eric Musselman, at least in the Big Ten. And Wisconsin now has a game over Purdue in the overall record. In the Big Ten, they are a half game back. But still, wow. That is a heck of a win for Wisconsin. Purdue is now basically out of the Big Ten title race after their loss to Michigan and then the loss to Wisconsin. You look at the Big Ten standings now. It's Michigan, Michigan State. Purdue is technically 3rd. Wisconsin is 4th. But again, if Wisconsin is to win their next Big Ten game, then they would have the tiebreaker over Purdue. Michigan and Michigan State, they play each other, I believe, in a couple weeks. That game will probably decide who wins the Big Ten. How about Dusty May? Dusty May, in his first year at Michigan, taking the Wolverines from the dumpster of college basketball, where I think they won 6 games last year. It was not pretty, which was why they fired Juwan Howard. Taking them from the doldrums to the top of the expanded Big Ten. Heck of a job done by Dusty May, who, of course, after the Indiana game in Bloomington a week ago, commented on the IU coaching search and said, I think it's crazy. That stuff's crazy. I love coaching at Michigan. He said Indiana is his foundation, but he's very happy at the University of Michigan, and why wouldn't he be? He's getting paid a handsome amount of money, came in with basically no pressure, and has a shot to win the Big Ten in his first season. That seems like a pretty good gig if you're me, if you're Dusty May. If I were in that situation, I mean, obviously it's not easy, but yeah, that's a pretty good gig. Now we got to talk about the IU coaching search because there has been a lot of noise, a lot of smoke, but I don't know that there's any fire. It's gotten to the point where national, and I use air quotes when I use this next word, national insiders are saying that Curt Cignetti has a hand in the coaching search, pushing for the former James Madison head coach who is now at Vanderbilt, whose name slips my mind, and I admittedly have to check. But Curt Cignetti has been involved in IU coaching search discourse now. It was Adam Zagoria, who is a self-ascribed basketball insider for the New York Times and Forbes. He said, Mark Byington, the former James Madison head coach who took them to the round of 32 last year, is now at Vanderbilt, is a name that Curt Cignetti is pushing for. Well, Curt Cignetti said otherwise. He replied to Adam Zagoria, New York Times basketball insider, on Twitter, and Cignetti says, not true. Scott Dolson knows a lot more about basketball than I do. I have my own team to focus on. It's the second time this year Curt Cignetti has tweeted, not true. The first time, of course, was when there was a Maryland troll on Twitter who said that D'Angelo Pons had an angry episode at practice and crashed out, which is what the cool kids say when somebody gets mad and their emotions get the best of them. Cignetti said, not true. So maybe that's a thing. But Curt Cignetti having to debunk IU basketball coaching rumors. I did not have that on my bingo card at this time a year ago. I have no answers. I don't think anybody has any answers. There has been a ton of speculation about not only Mark Byington, but Brad Stevens, Chris Beard, Tom Crean. Really? I've seen his name thrown in there. He's not coming back. He's not coming back through that door. Are you kidding me? I don't know that anybody has any answers right now. Because Brad Stevens was implicated in the coaching search 4 years ago as well. In 2021, people wanted him to come to Bloomington. Let's be realistic. The guy is a front office executive for the Boston Celtics. The Celtics just won an NBA title, and they are the odds-on favorite to make it back to the finals from the Eastern Conference. They're not leading the Eastern Conference, but they have better odds than the Cleveland Cavaliers do to make it back. Brad Stevens has literally zero pressure on him as far as, success goes because he just won a title. By the way, he beat the Pacers along the way. He didn't beat the Pacers. I think the Pacers beat the Pacers, actually. Yeah, that was rough. But I don't think Brad Stevens is coming to Bloomington. I think Indiana is going to either make him an offer or they've already made him an offer. I don't think he's going to take the offer. Why would you demote yourself, subject yourself to objectively one of the most insane fan bases in college basketball, and try to fix a program that's been broken for the better part of the last 25 years, aside from 2002? Okay, fine. The last 23 years. Why would you subject yourself to that when you've got probably one of the most secure jobs in sports right now in the Celtics front office? I don't see a reason for Brad Stevens to come to Bloomington. I know he has a ton of Indiana ties. Believe me, I grew up here. I grew up knowing the name Brad Stevens. But I just don't think it's a realistic possibility. Dusty May, on the other hand, he did not explicitly say no. He said, it's crazy. Indiana's my foundation. I grew up here. Obviously, he grew up in Terre Haute. Of course, went to Indiana, was an assistant, was a student manager. He has all the ties in the world. If you made him an offer that he could not refuse, would he take it? I don't know. I'm speculating about throwing money around, and it's the kind of money that I have never seen in my life. It's difficult to put it into perspective. Dusty May has a $5 million buyout if he is to leave his contract before April of 2029 at the University of Michigan. I would imagine Indiana would have to agree to cover that buyout and then give him a crazy contract on top of that to lure him away from Ann Arbor after one season. I just don't see it happening. If you want a Dusty May, You should have gotten him last year. You should have gotten him after he left FAU, because it was a lot easier to sway him from staying at FAU to coming to Bloomington than it will be to tell him, hey, leave Ann Arbor, leave your Big Ten championship contending team, come to Bloomington and fix a broken program. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you. Indiana men's basketball dead in the water. I think we've now beaten that horse enough. It's dead. Their season is dead. In order to make the NCAA tournament, they have to not only beat Purdue, they probably have to win out. I'm just being honest. And with the way things are going, it's definitely not encouraging. They've lost now, 9 of 11 games? 8 of 10? Something bad. They haven't done a lot of winning, which is not great when you're in the Big Ten and every game matters. Indiana has not lived up to the billing at all. Just sleepwalk to the middle of March, I guess, and be done. Just be done. Just be done. End the season. End the season. I think that's the best for everybody. On the women's side, things are a little different. They won the Barn Burner Trophy yesterday, beating Purdue at Assembly Hall. It was not close. Indiana began that game on a 20-2 run, won 78-56. They have 5 games left as well, or 4 games, I should say. Ohio State on Thursday. Ohio State's a really good team, as is Michigan State, as is Maryland. Whew. Yeah, plenty of resume boosters still on the docket for Indiana women's basketball. They currently sit at 16-9 overall, 8-6 in conference play. Pretty much right in the middle of the Big Ten as well. So, yeah, I mean, the Big Ten on the women's side, I think, is... I think it's a little more top-heavy, obviously, with USC and UCLA just going completely nuclear. They are a combined now 55-3. They just played each other, and Juju Watkins single-handedly dismantled UCLA in that one. She already has 1,500 career points, and she hasn't even finished her sophomore season. That is just stupid. Whatever records there are for her to break, she's going to break them. And that's pretty cool. Unless you're another team in the Big Ten, in which case I would be kind of scared. But Indiana will play Ohio State, which is 3rd in the Big Ten, Maryland, which is 5th in the conference, and Michigan State is 5th, Maryland is 6th, and Indiana plays both of them down the stretch this season. So maybe this win over Purdue can kickstart some momentum for the Indiana women. They haven't really been able to sustain success as they have in years past. Just kind of 2 steps forward, a couple steps back. It's tough. When your all-time great post player graduates, you tend to regress a little bit, but they are still clawing their way. They will be in the Big Ten tournament. It's a question of whether or not they can make a run. The Big Ten tournament last year was the host of a little bit of chaos. The top seed Ohio State got upset, and I believe Maryland was the one that beat them. Maryland had a down year, but they beat Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. Indiana, of course, got upset in the Big Ten tournament last year as well on the women's side, losing to Michigan. That was a game Mackenzie Holmes did not play. She played. She didn't start. She came in the third quarter, and actually I think the team got worse because they were used to playing without her by that point. That was a long drive to Minneapolis, and I remember sitting in the media room of the Target Center afterwards when Indiana lost that game. I believe they blew a 17-point lead. Just thinking, wow, that was one of the most impressive train wrecks I have ever seen. But they'll look to avoid that sort of chaos this year. There should be a decent turnout. Again, the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis, that begins on March 5th, which is not that far away. 2 weeks from Wednesday is when the Big Ten tournament starts on the women's side. And then for the men, it is another week away, beginning on March 12th. I believe that sounds right. I'm interested to see if Indiana can even make it. The men's tournament begins on March 12th. If Indiana makes it, sure, you could go on a run. Maybe you have the home fans that get behind you. You have what happened a couple years ago. Actually, that was 3 years ago now, when you beat Michigan and you beat Illinois, and that helps you get into the NCAA tournament. But Trace Jackson Davis isn't walking through that door, and Trace Jackson Davis was a big reason why, and so was Xavier Johnson. Love him or hate him, Xavier Johnson was a big part of why Mike Woodson got to the tournament in his first year as Indiana head coach. Neither one of them are walking through that door. Miles Rice is not Xavier Johnson. There's a sentence I didn't think I'd say, but I said it. So, yeah, it's again, as an Indiana fan, if you're watching these games, if you're emotionally invested in these games, I don't know how you can continue to bear with it. I don't know if you can bear with it at this point, because it's the way they've lost these games. It's the same thing, game after game after game at home. And then on the road, yeah, they might pull off an upset when you're playing to defend Bob Knight's legacy and you switch to a 2-3 zone against a team that can't make three-point shots. But that doesn't work against everybody. That just doesn't work. And, in about a week, you'll go out. Okay, it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks, you'll go out to the West Coast, right, where it's been notoriously difficult for teams to win, traveling west, just because of the sheer distance you have to cover. Washington's not great. Like, Nebraska beat them, and Nebraska's not great, but Nebraska also beat you by 17. So if you're Indiana, Oregon's going to be a tough game. Washington's not good, but again, you're going out west, and Indiana just hasn't done that this year, so I have no idea what to expect. At home, against Penn State, that's a game you're going to have to win. Against Purdue, just don't put the ball in the hands of Miles Rice if it's close at the end, and you'll have a chance. Especially if you let Trey Galloway, Luke Goody, and Anthony Leal play 35 minutes, because they're from Indiana, and they, I think, inherently do not like Purdue a lot more than the other players on that roster do not like Purdue. I guess they like Purdue less. That would be the grammatically correct way of saying it. Either way, Indiana against Purdue, a week from today, I don't really know what to expect of that game, other than, the most likely outcome is what's happened the last 3 home games. Purdue gets off to a hot start. Indiana fans get mad. Indiana goes on a run, gets the crowd back into it. This probably happens after halftime. Purdue trades buckets with Indiana for a little bit and then ultimately makes a couple plays late because Indiana forgets how to play basketball every time there's a minute left in a close game, unless they're at Ohio State, which, again, Anthony Leal was on the floor for that. Good things happen when Anthony Leal is on the floor. That's just how it goes. He's one of the only players who flirts with a positive plus-minus regardless of the final score. The exception to that was when Indiana played Wisconsin, but the entire team had a plus-minus of about negative 25 in that game, so you kind of throw it out the window. Now we shift gears to Indiana baseball a little bit. They are not having fun at the Sanderson Ford College Baseball Classic in Surprise, Arizona. 0-2 on the season so far. There are still 54 games left, I know. But the way they're losing these games is not great for the big picture. We'll talk more about that on the other side of this break. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Welcome back to IU Sports Sunday. I'm Nick Rodecap with you on this snowy Sunday morning in Bloomington. Indiana baseball is halfway through their first series of the weekend. President's Day is Monday, so that's why they're playing on Monday. They've lost their first 2 games. They fell to UNLV on Friday night 4-2. They gave up a grand slam in the first inning, and that was it. That was all the runs the Rebels needed to hand Indiana its 6th consecutive opening day loss. They have not won on opening day since 2019 when they beat Memphis 6-1. It was Jeff Mercer's first game as Indiana head coach. 0-6 on opening day since then, and the Hoosiers fell again last night against Xavier down in Surprise, Arizona. 8-6 in 10 innings, the final score in that one. And it does not get any easier this afternoon. 2 o'clock p.m., about 5 hours from now, they will play the 7th best team in the country, Oregon State. The Beavers, one of the favorites to make it to Omaha, it feels like every single year. It's no different this time around. They have a stacked roster. Just utter filth in all phases. Pitching staff is loaded. They've got some Golden Spikes Award watch list members, the award given to the top amateur baseball player in the country. Oh, and by the way, they run-ruled UNLV yesterday 16-0 in 7 innings. Yeah. That game was at 2 p.m. Eastern on Flow Sports and on the IU Sports Radio Network. I say that because Flow Sports is a paid streaming service. If you don't want to pay for it, you can listen to it for free, which is nice. Very nice. That game, 2 p.m., Oregon State. And the question now for Indiana, Jeff Mercer's philosophy, and it's a good one for Indiana baseball, is to win today. So if that means throwing your best arms when you have a chance to win, then that means throwing your best arms when you have a chance to win, which is a sound philosophy on its face. The problem is the offense didn't pull its weight, and the team defense was awful. And that led to Indiana falling to Xavier last night. That game was completely drunk, just stupid. We'll take a look at it. And it was basically a pitcher's duel. For the first couple innings, Xavier then gave up a bases-loaded walk in the third. Indiana added another run in the fifth on a sac fly from Joey Brincheski. It was 2-0 in the fifth, and then, you thought Indiana was feeling pretty good. They're up a couple runs, and their starter, Cole Gilly, transferred from Indiana State, was dealing. In 5 2/3, I think it was, Gilly struck out 11. He was shoving. 5 1/3, gave up 3 hits. 2 runs, 1 earned, struck out 11, did not walk anybody either. Extremely efficient, and you think, oh, well, why did he not stay in? He only threw about 80 pitches. Well, it's early in the year, and these guys are on strict pitch counts. Whether you like it or not, that's the reality of baseball. In this era of arm injuries, of elbow injuries, you got to make sure your pitchers are healthy throughout the entire season. So Gilly is pulled after Xavier makes it 2-1. And then the reliever who comes in, Ben Grable, highly touted bullpen arm, great stuff. Before he even throws a pitch, he balks a runner to third base, that runner that had reached on an RBI double. He balks a runner to third base. Later in the at-bat, he throws a wild pitch. That wasn't in the at-bat, it was in the inning. Either way, wild pitch, and then a throwing error on the return throw to the plate. Xavier takes the lead. They add a couple more. It's 4-2. They add some insurance in the 8th and the 9th. Indiana's down 6-3 going into the 9th, and then they rally with 2 outs. And the 2-out rally was ridiculous. Started with a single from Hogan Denny, a true freshman. That was his first collegiate hit. True freshman, line drive single. He had gotten unlucky with some balls in play earlier on in the game, but he finally got one to drop. Tyler Cerny gets hit by a pitch. Cerny had a home run in the 7th. He's back on base. Jason Oliver, star second baseman. He's only a sophomore. Takes a breaking ball and crushes it over the left center field fence, and we're tied at 6. So you felt pretty good if you were Indiana. You had all the momentum going into that 10th inning. Ryan Kraft comes out, new reliever in the game, gets a pair of strikeouts, and then with 2 outs, this time it's Xavier who decides, we can do one of those rallies too. We can put together a couple of those. They used an infield hit, a throwing error, a bloop single, and I think there was another line drive hit in there. It was another infield hit. Yeah. Infield hit, throwing error, which advanced the runner to second base, and then a bloop single and an infield hit that did not make it past the pitcher's mound. And that was how Xavier took the lead. They won 8-6 in 10 innings. Indiana's bullpen failed to close yet another game. And the offense did not do themselves any favors. We'll dive into some more numbers in a little bit. But just, you look at the box score, and I know box score watching isn't great. But as someone who has covered this team now, this is my 3rd year doing it, you start to find certain themes with Indiana baseball. And one of those themes, unfortunately for them over the last couple of years, has been their inability to score with runners in scoring position. Their inability to capitalize when they have traffic on the base paths. And that, again, was the case not only last night, but in night 1 of the Sanderson Ford College Baseball Classic in Surprise, Arizona. So Indiana baseball will take on Oregon State at 2 p.m. today. Oregon State probably... they're feeling pretty good, I'm sure. After run-ruling UNLV, they're 2-0, which is the shock of absolutely nobody. So it does not get any easier, much like for Indiana basketball, for Indiana baseball today in Surprise, Arizona. We'll talk more about that and other IU sports when we come back. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you. It is not forest visiting weather right now. It's still snowy and cold and gross and bad outside. Yeah. I feel like it's been maybe 35 and cloudy every single day for the last 3 months. I don't know if that's just me going insane. I don't know if it's having to do with every Indiana men's basketball game feeling like it plays out the same way now, or at least one of 2 ways. Blowout loss or ugly close loss. They're all losses. It's all the same. It doesn't matter. That's just kind of the reality, at least in Bloomington. I don't know if Assembly Hall has been full for a game this year. I know they'll say the listed attendance is 17,222 for every game, but I feel like every single time that I've been there, and that's a lot of conference games, there have been empty seats in the balcony. which used to not be the case. The student section was definitely not full on Friday, which I understand, because it was Valentine's Day. It was an 8 o'clock tip, and I think that was a game that a lot of freshmen had tickets to, based on what I heard. Now, the Purdue game, of course, it's sold out. It's Purdue. That's kind of a no-brainer. I would hope that Indiana plays with some fight in the first half because it's Purdue. The question is, can they sustain it? Can they make plays down the stretch? It did not happen. Did not happen again. And, it's been more of the same for Indiana men's basketball. Mike Woodson, after the game against UCLA, which, if you remember correctly, Miles Rice chucked up another stupid shot, and shocker, it didn't work. Mike Woodson said, again, the play wasn't the play that I drew up in the timeout. It was a botched play. And, it wasn't just that Miles Rice took a bad shot. It wasn't just that. It was that Mackenzie Mbako then blew the open layup right underneath the basket. And then, with a chance to either tie or take the lead, I don't remember which, Mackenzie Mbako again was open in the corner for three. Open look, story of the game. Open look and he missed it. Just bad execution. Bad execution down the stretch again for Indiana men's basketball. And Mike Woodson says, when he's asked about that, the execution, I wish I had the answer. And then he lists all these games, Northwestern, Maryland, Purdue, Michigan, and now, of course, UCLA, all winnable. You win one or two of them, you feel good about where you are. 9 out of 10 games, you need to make those plays. The fact that we've lost them, guys are searching. That's what he says. And he says that he's searching to get them over the finish line. And then, stop me if you heard this one before, Mike Woodson says, it's my job to get them over the hump. The dreaded hump, that dastardly hump, that all-encompassing, relentless, merciless hump. The same hump that Indiana basketball just keeps failing to get over. This is like the biggest camel of all time. The biggest mountain of all time. This is the Mount Everest of humps. It's impossible to get over at this point. That's what it seems like anyway. I don't know. I think maybe the hump is insurmountable at this point. Because, it would be one thing if Northwestern was good. Northwestern is not good. Northwestern is very bad, actually. I know that they lost Brooks Barnhizer. And I know that Brooks Barnhizer is one of their best players. But Northwestern is awful. Awful. They're below Indiana in the conference standings. Nebraska's not great either. Nebraska blew out Indiana. Iowa's not great. They blew out Indiana. It's puzzling, some of these teams that the Hoosiers have lost to. Now, Maryland is good. Michigan is good. Purdue is decent, although they're not playing great right now, and they may have peaked way too early. But it's just some of these losses. That's the hump. That's the hump. Losing to bad teams that you shouldn't lose to. Indiana played well against Michigan State because of the zone defense. The zone defense did not work against UCLA because UCLA shot better than 4 of 23 from three-point range. That's what Michigan shot on Tuesday night when they lost to Indiana at the Breslin Center. UCLA shot 45% from three because they have guys who can score from out there consistently. Michigan has struggled with outside shooting all season long. So, of course, the 2-3 zone worked against them. That was never going to be a question. But Mike Woodson said, they had big-time shooters on the outside, which is true. They had a lot of different guys who knocked down key shots, and most of them were from three-point range. Sky Clark was one of them. Indiana never played against Sky Clark, even though he was in the Big Ten. Sky Clark, Tyler Bilodeau made one early, and when he wasn't making threes, he was getting to the free throw line, and he was getting whatever he wanted inside the paint. Sky Clark made some shots. Kobe Johnson made some shots. I thought Kobe Johnson actually played really well. He had 10, 6, and 3. And it just seemed like he was kind of always in the right place. He was always doing the right thing. So I was very impressed by him. Sky Clark was 3 of 3. Kobe Johnson 2 of 4. Dylan Andrews made one. Trent Perry made one. Lazar Stefanovic made one. These guys they had a lot of different guys who could score, really. And the advantage for Indiana is that they will have had a week and a day to prepare for Purdue. They will be fresh. Mackenzie Mbako, he was hobbled late in the first half. Maybe that impacted his ability to score late in the game. I don't know. But if that impacted his ability to score, then why was he getting the ball in the corner on that baseline out of bounds play? It was an open look, and usually he makes those. But if he was not 100%, then why was the ball not in Luke Goody's hands? I don't know. I'm not the coach. I also think that it wasn't just the zone defense that hurt Indiana against UCLA, because it was very poor zone defense. It was also the two big lineup. I was on the broadcast with Zion Brown on WIUX, and we were talking about how it was a 3-point UCLA lead when Indiana switched to the two big lineup for the first time against the Bruins. I think it was 16-13. It was early on. And I said to Zion, my broadcast partner, I said, make a mental note of this score. UCLA is up 3. Indiana switches to the two big lineup, and UCLA then outscores Indiana 13-6. A 7-point swing, which pushed the lead to 10. And it stayed at 10 for the rest of the first half and never got back within, I think the closest it got after that was 4, maybe 2. But it always felt like it was a 2-possession game after that. The two big lineup has not worked all season for Indiana. It works for other teams. Like, it works great for Michigan. That's because Danny Wolf can shoot from outside. And he's also an elite rebounder. He basically averages a double-double. I think he does average a double-double. Malik Reneau is not Danny Wolf. There is a reason that teams leave Malik Reneau open when he thinks about a three-point shot. It's because he shoots like 15% from out there. It's like he and Bryson Tucker should be the two guys that are never allowed to attempt a three-point basket in a game. Because they can't make them. They just can't. And it's amazing because at this time last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, and I could go on and on and on. But at this time last year, everybody was talking about how Indiana needs three-point shooting. And we thought that Indiana got three-point shooting. Remember, before the season, Mike Woodson said, these were his words, that he feels like this is the most talented roster he's ever had at Indiana. This would be the 4th roster he's had. So statistically, there was a 25% chance of this being the most talented roster that he's had. I on paper, sure. Miles Rice, Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. Umar Balla, the top-rated transfer in the country. Mackenzie Mbako, the Big Ten Freshman of the Year. Bryson Tucker, highly touted recruit. I could go on. It just hasn't materialized. It's been so drastically underwhelming. And I remember I was talking to an IU student yesterday who wants to get into writing, like sports writing, which is one of the things that I have a decent amount of experience in, at least as a student, which is nothing compared to the ones who do it for a living. But as far as students go, I've written my fair share of columns and stories and things like that. If you want to read them, you can follow me on Twitter at Nick Rodecap, NickRodecap. But anyway, he was talking to me about how he thinks Mike Woodson is underrated and overhated. And it got me thinking, are there really students that think that? I understand, I sound like an old head, like, get off my lawn, you don't know what, you don't know your hand from a hole in the ground, right? But he said that he thinks Mike Woodson is underrated and overhated. And I was curious as to why you would think that. Because sure, if you're an outsider looking in, you might think, oh, well, these Indiana fans are insatiable. Every time they lose, they want their head coach fired. And in a vacuum, if you ignore all the context, then yeah. If you're looking at it without any sort of background information, it might seem a little weird. Like, oh, Mike Woodson's gotten some guys to the NBA. He's gotten 3 guys into the NBA. 2 of them have received meaningful playing time. Of course, the big fellas, Jackson Davis and Khalil Ware. TJD, pride of Greenwood, Indiana. But outside of getting those guys to the NBA, which I don't think should bear a whole lot of weight in your college legacy, right? I think getting guys to the pros in any college sport is a bonus rather than something you should build your program on, because it's not sustainable for long-term success unless you're Kentucky or Duke maybe. Cooper Flagg said he wants to come back. That's a whole other conversation. But outside of getting guys to the NBA, Mike Woodson really hasn't done a lot in Indiana. You could say, yeah, well, he made the NCAA tournament twice. He won a play-in game against Wyoming and won a round of 64 game against Kent State? Kennesaw State? I think it was Kennesaw State. It was like 100-87. And then they got blown out by Miami in the round of 32. And from what I remember watching that game, it didn't look like anybody on the Indiana team besides TJD wanted to be there. That's really it for Mike Woodson's legacy now. Okay, he beat Purdue 3 times. Is that really the standard? Oh, yeah, you beat Purdue, so you're a good coach. Sure, beating Purdue is nice, but, like, I that shouldn't be the determining factor for whether or not a coach is good, if you can beat your rival. Because Purdue fans like to say that Indiana fans think Purdue is their Super Bowl. And I feel like Indiana's Super Bowl in men's basketball should not be beating its rival in a Big Ten game or 2 Big Ten games that at the end of the day mean as much as any other Big Ten game. So I don't know. I don't think, and what I said to this kid was, if you're going to say that Indiana men's basketball head coach Mike Woodson is underrated and overhated, you've got to really make sure you shore that up, because there are a lot of people who are going to disagree with you, and that doesn't mean you're wrong. I think he's wrong. It doesn't mean you're wrong. If you can support it with evidence, that's fine. I do think, though, that most of the criticism of Indiana men's basketball under Mike Woodson is justified. And it's not because of just me pulling it out of thin air. It's because of the words and actions of the players and the coaches, because it's a two-way street. Again, if you're going to have 2 of your veteran guys, Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal, come out on senior day and tell the fans to chill out and tell the fans that you're going to get this thing figured out, which is what they did last year after they beat Michigan State, then you better back it up. Because, at the end of the day, you're writing a check with your mouth that your on-court play this year has not been able to cash. And again, Mike Woodson before the season, this is the most talented roster I've had. Indiana was picked by a lot of people to win the Big Ten. That didn't happen for no reason. But at the end of the day, you've become the Chicago Bears of college basketball. Off-season champs, ton of hype, highly touted names, and nothing to show for it. You are the Chicago Bears of college basketball. You're coasting on the glory of the 80s. That was 40 years ago, man. My parents were in college when Indiana men's basketball was in its glory days. That was so long ago. What was the price of gas in 1987? That was the last time, of course, Indiana men's basketball won a national championship. What was the price of gas back then? 90 cents a gallon. Inflation adjusted, that's $2.57, which is about 50 cents cheaper than gas is in Bloomington right now. 90 cents a gallon for gas in 1987. Under $1. The last time Indiana won a national championship. That was a generation ago. That was 2 generations ago. Whatever you want to say. It was a long time ago. But Indiana has become the Chicago Bears. Will a change at the top even fix it? I don't know. Because you've seen a lot of coaches try to fix it over the last, we'll say, 20 years, right? After Mike Davis got fired, you had Kelvin Sampson. I just think it's so funny that everything Kelvin Sampson did, at least a lot of what he did, is legal now. It's kind of funny. But anyway, he got fired because he broke the rules. Tom Crean came in, had to build from nothing, got Indiana back to the Sweet 16, couldn't get them over that hump. That's a decent-sized hump compared to Mike Woodson's Indiana humps of not being able to close games or compete in some games on the road. The hump of getting to the Elite Eight, I think Indiana fans would take not getting over that hump compared to what they have right now. They wouldn't be happy about it because Indiana fans won't be happy until Banner 6 goes up in Assembly Hall. But I don't know that that's ever going to happen. No self-imposed limitations, in the words of Curt Cignetti. But I think there's just something fundamentally wrong with Indiana men's basketball. I have no idea what it is. Maybe Brad Stevens could fix it, but I don't think he's walking through that door. I don't think Dusty May is walking through that door either. Because Indiana just has not been what people think it is, and it hasn't been that way for a really long time. And when your players and your coaches come out and they're critical of the fan base, they're ducking the team's iconic radio broadcaster on the pre- and post-game show and having assistants fill in, they're not making players available to speak to the media after home losses, which they did against UCLA, and they did against Michigan. There's no accountability, by and large. That, I think, is why a lot of people are so critical. It's because of the way they handle these losses. I mean, again, I was at the Nebraska and Iowa games. By the end of those games, and throughout, as the games were slipping away, it didn't seem like anybody wanted to be there. It didn't seem like anybody cared. It didn't seem like anybody had any pride. That is the problem, I think. It's not just that they're losing. It's that there's no pride. I really think that's what it is. Because I sound like an old head again. Get off my lawn. I'm going to yell at the clouds, right? But I feel like with players now getting paid at the scale that they're getting paid, it's not like pro sports where your contract is often dependent on your performance, whether or not you get cut or you get benched. There are playing time incentives in the pros and whatnot, right? In college, with NIL, the check clears no matter what because it's not tied to your on-court play. So you can play like garbage. You can check out. You can get blown out by 20 every other time you go on the road like Indiana has this season. You can fail to execute down the stretch of games. You can squander the support of your fans at home, but it doesn't matter because you're still getting paid. You're getting paid the exact same amount, whether you fight, scratch, and claw, or you just give up. I'm not saying they're giving up. It feels like sometimes they're giving up. If it's not a close game that they find a way to blow, it's a blowout loss that they're never really in contention to win. That's me speaking from my personal experience, and it's just not something that's enjoyable to watch anymore. I, as a student broadcaster, never take for granted a chance to call a game at Assembly Hall. It's a blessing, it's a privilege, it's not a right. But I'm glad that I don't have to call another game at Assembly Hall this season. I did my last one on Friday, the way the scheduling worked out. I'm glad that I get to focus now on Indiana baseball because I know that at least with Indiana baseball, they never quit. Even when they're down big, sure, they might punt a game, but they're never going to stop fighting. They're never yelling at each other on the bench. I've covered this team for 2 years, so maybe I missed something before 2023. But I've watched a lot of Indiana baseball. I've been to a ton of Indiana baseball games. I've never seen them yelling at each other in the dugout. I've never seen the body language as bad as it can be with Indiana men's basketball. The players and coaches take accountability after losses. Indiana got upset sometimes in baseball last year. Coach Mercer, Jeff Mercer, always took accountability for it. He was very matter of fact. And, I remember there was a loss that they had against Evansville. Now, Evansville was actually really good last season, but Indiana lost to them at home. It was considered an upset. And Mercer talked about how Indiana had made strides. And they had some good games, but he said that it was not that night. They did not play their best, and thus they did not deserve to win. And there was no excuse. There was no coach speak. There was no, you got to get over the hump. There was no hump. There was no hump. It was just, hey, we did not play well today. We've got some things we need to fix, and we're going to fix them. And Indiana ended up fixing them. They fought through a lot of injuries. They made it to the Big Ten semifinal, and they made the NCAA tournaments for the second straight season because they took accountability, and they realized that there were things they needed to fix. I don't know that there's any accountability with Indiana men's basketball. again, I'm not connected to the program. I don't know what goes on in discussions in the locker room. I just know that what I've seen is the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over at the end of games. It's like they forget how to play. It's like nobody knows what's going on. It leads people to believe that they don't work on these situations in practice. It's just kind of put the ball in the hands of Miles Rice and hope that something happens. They don't have a plan. There's no adjustments. And I think that's another reason why people are so critical of Mike Woodson. It's because, again, they're losing these games in the same fashion every single time. By contrast, with Indiana baseball, if a player's not producing, then he goes to the bench and somebody else takes his spot. The second baseman last year was supposed to be this Houston transfer named Brandon Burkell. Brandon Burkell started the season hitting like 150. He was awful. So he got benched. Jason Oliver came in, and Jason Oliver started producing, so he got the starting job. Jason Oliver hit a game-tying 3-run homer in the 9th inning of Indiana's game against Xavier last night because he was productive last year, and he got rewarded. Because Indiana baseball is merit-based, right? There's way less money being thrown around in college baseball than there is in college basketball, but money should not determine who's on the floor. And with Miles Rice being on the floor in crunch time, despite repeatedly failing to produce, I can't help but think that there's got to be something else at play, because that's the only thing that makes any sense. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rodecap with you, and Indiana softball is rolling right now. They have won 8 games in a row. They haven't lost since opening day. And it's weird because they're not going to be home for, like a month? Although for their sake, that's probably a good thing because it's not very pleasant outside right now. Snowy, windy, cold, etc. And yeah, Indiana softball and Indiana baseball have actually kind of run parallel to each other the last couple years. They've both made the NCAA tournament. They've been decent in the Big Ten. Indiana softball actually won 40 games last season. Indiana baseball did not. IU softball, I believe, went to Missouri. Yes, they went to Missouri, lost in that regional. But they made the NCAA tournament the last couple seasons. 8-1, the start for Shauna Stanton's team, and the Indiana softball head coach, she just won her 800th career game as Indiana softball head coach a couple of weeks ago. And the Hoosiers next will go to Lubbock, Texas, play a couple against UTEP, a couple against Texas Tech, and one against Illinois Chicago, I believe, as they look to continue their hot streak. They will not be home, Indiana softball will not, until March 7th. It's a Friday, the Hoosier Classic, which is a yearly tournament. They'll host some different teams from around the Midwest. This year it's Western Michigan, Bowling Green, Illinois, Chicago. No Valpo. I think Valpo was here last year, but they will not make the trip down I-65. That's the first time they'll be home. March 7th on a Friday at 3:30 p.m. They're around for the whole weekend. They will play 5 games, which is a lot, but softball pitching is a lot less volatile than baseball pitching is, so it's all right. As for Indiana baseball, they have kind of an interesting non-conference. The Big Ten added 2 more series with conference expansion taking place. So you went from 24 Big Ten games to 30, which means that you're going to play conference games beginning in less than a month, I believe. Yeah, it begins March 14th, so just under a month away when Indiana's conference slate begins on the baseball side. Their home opener is scheduled for this Wednesday. They're not going to play. Pretty much bet the house on it because it will be 25 and snowy and gross, and the ground will probably still be frozen, let's be honest. Not exactly baseball weather. So good for their pitching staff's sake that they will not play a midweek this week, and in all likelihood. Nothing's been released yet, nothing's been confirmed, but based on history, you would assume that they're not going to play. So after they finish up and surprise Arizona, they've got 2 more games, one at 2 o'clock today against number 7 Oregon State, and one at noon tomorrow on President's Day. A rematch with UNLV, who beat them on opening night and got run-ruled by Oregon State yesterday, 16-0. Indiana will go to Cary, North Carolina, and that's kind of cool, at least for me, selfishly. 2 years ago, I was an intern down in Cary, North Carolina, working for USA Baseball as a broadcast intern at their national training complex in Cary, which is where these games will be played. So that's kind of a cool crossover, selfishly, because they're playing on the same fields that I pulled many a tarp on and called many a game at, and they're using the same, I'd imagine they're using the same back-end streaming network as we did, Pixelot, which was interesting to say the least. I never thought I'd be setting up streams on the back end, but I did. We got through it and got a lot of quality reps. Cary is they've got a really nice complex down there. They just finished building an indoor training facility there not too long ago. It's got a full-size infield, I believe. They've got weight rooms. They've got classrooms, I'm pretty sure, as well. So I know that Aiden Decker-Petty, TJ Schuyler, and Joey Brincheski will be taking their sport marketing midterm, most likely, from Cary. Because we've got that coming up this Thursday, SPHM 418. Fun time. It's cool seeing all the student athletes in that class. Got a ton of different sports in there as well. A lot of swimmers and divers, I believe. Baseball, basketball. It's a mix, and that's one of the cool things about the sport marketing program is that there are so many student athletes who you just cross paths with. I remember last semester, a lot of members of the Indiana men's soccer team were in that class, including Sam Sarver, who has since gone on to the pro ranks, I should say. I believe he was drafted by North Texas MLS Next Pro. So Sam Sarver went pro. One of the more storied careers in Indiana men's soccer history. And there was some interesting news on the Indiana soccer front, not for the men, but for the women. 6-year head coach Erwin Van Bennekom resigned. He inked an assistant coaching deal with Florida State, the 2023 national champs. So he is down in Tallahassee, and returning to Bloomington is Josh Reif. They announced this move. It was about 5 days ago now. Reif played at Indiana for 2 seasons and made the College Cup Final Four in both of those seasons, 2000 and 2001. They won the Big Ten in 2001 as well. One of many national championship appearances and Big Ten titles for Indiana men's soccer, won by Josh Reif. He now coaches the women's team. He was at Ball State prior to his hiring by Scott Dolson in Indiana Athletics. Ball State won 49 games in his 6 seasons there, including a 33-18-13 record in the MAC. So a good run for Reif at Ball State. Pretty hard to beat them at home. He coached the 2023 MAC Offensive Player of the Year. Reif, a very, very good resume, and I'm excited to see what he can do for Indiana women's soccer. They, under Coach Van Bennekom, kind of struggled offensively, as I recall. A lot of low-scoring matches. If they scored 3 in a match, it was kind of a unicorn. So I'm intrigued to see how that program shapes up. The soccer teams will begin their spring seasons soon, relatively speaking. They usually play some indoor exhibitions. I know Indiana had one against St. Louis, I think it was, or Notre Dame. It was one of the two at Grand Park last spring. As the Hoosiers on the men's side continue their quest for that elusive ninth star, the one that has eluded them for now about 13 years. But still, Todd Yeagley, one of the most successful coaches in the country, if not the most successful coach during his time in Bloomington. I, for one, cannot wait for the fall, not only because of Indiana football, but also because of Indiana men's soccer. If you haven't been to Bill Armstrong Stadium for a game, you got to go. You got to go. The atmosphere is great. The stands are usually really full. The students always show out. And as long as it's not too hot, which is rare because the games always start so late, but usually there's great weather. And Bill Armstrong Stadium, I mean, the tradition there speaks for itself. Little 500 is coming up in a couple months. It always amazes me, the training that those riders go through. It is a year-long process. They start training for the next year's race really as soon as the checkered flag flies in the middle of April. Little 500 this year is April, I want to say 25th and 26th, the last weekend of the month. And it's incredible. There really is nothing like it. The amount of support that these riders have from their classmates, from alumni, it is awesome. It's so cool. And they are athletes. They are some of the best athletes on campus. So it's really cool to watch. And it's really cool to broadcast, too. It's cool on all fronts. There's a lot going on in IU Bloomington. And, I think it makes me wonder, if Indiana basketball had been good this year, what would the on-campus vibes have been like? Because, man, Indiana football was good. Indiana men's soccer was pretty good. For their standards, it was actually a down year. But they're always good. Indiana men's soccer is always good. Indiana basketball, just that one missing piece. But we've talked about that ad nauseum. Their season is basically over at this point. Short of winning at least 4 of 5 to close the season, if not all 5. You certainly have to beat Purdue at this point. You've got a week to prepare for it, and it better be a week well spent. You're listening to IU Sports Sunday. Back here on IU Sports Sunday, Nick Rotacap with you as we approach the big dance, March Madness. It's about a month away. March Madness, though, is only the month of March is only 2 weeks away. Feels like this whole season for Indiana men's basketball has been nothing but madness. Not the good kind. I don't know where they turn at this point. We talked about this stretch that's ending with Purdue next Sunday, as a stretch of games that would define Indiana's season. All these quad one games in succession, well, it's defined their season, all right. It's been nothing short of disappointing. And I wonder, in terms of roster construction, in terms of guys in the portal, guys who are graduating, how many guys on this roster are going to come back? Right? I don't know that the answer is going to be very many guys coming back. We could go down the list if we want, but I'll take some key names. Miles Rice. I don't know. I really do not know. I think he might stay. Maybe. Gabe Cupps is injured right now. I could see him leaving. Anthony Leal is graduating. Malik Renew has been named as one of the guys who is most likely to enter the portal. Bryson Tucker, I don't know. I really have no idea. He was such a highly touted recruit, and right now it just seems like he can't shoot. Kanan Carlisle is probably gone. Luke Goody is graduating, I believe. There's a chance he might apply for a waiver and try to get an extra year. I don't know how successful that would be. So we'll say Luke Goody's graduating. Umar Ballo, Langdon Hatton graduating. Looking at the walk-ons, the guys that never play. Although it would be funny if they did play and they played better than the scholarship guys. I think that would be hilarious. Mackenzie Mbako will probably try to test the NBA draft waters, but I don't know how successful he'll be, given that he did not produce as much as people thought he would this year. He had that slump 4 or 5 games where he shot about 15% from 3 and scored about 4 points a game. That's not exactly an NBA prospect to me. He definitely has the tools. He has the potential, but I don't know that he's there yet. Trey Galloway is graduating, and as far as guys that actually play, that's pretty much it. So there's a chance that, once again, this Indiana roster could look extremely different next year, which is kind of just the norm in college basketball now. I will admit that outside of Indiana, I did not follow college basketball as closely as I probably should have growing up, especially since, 2019, 2020. I don't think I even knew that Terrence Shannon Jr. played for Texas Tech. So that just kind of goes to show with the transfer portal, guys that you might link to your program, you might identify with as a fan. That doesn't really happen much anymore. Because Terrence Shannon Jr., I only knew him as Illinois. And it's funny that they hung up his jersey in the rafters for what? Playing there for 2 years, and did they even win the Big Ten with him? I think they won the Big Ten with him. What? Giving up a 30-0 run to UConn in the NCAA tournament? That gets your jersey hung up. Anyway, it just kind of goes to show that, these guys, they just kind of jump ship to whoever's offering them the biggest paycheck, and that's just the reality of college basketball now. It's funny, though, because you look at the success Purdue has had, and they've done it primarily, like they made a national championship, obviously, last year, thanks to Zach Edey, who was not from Indiana, but you look at the guys around him, all of whom came back. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Caleb First, all from Indiana. And it's interesting the way that these two programs have gone about building their rosters in this new era of college athletics. I do wonder with revenue sharing how that's going to impact the NIL distribution. I don't think anybody in the world knows. You've heard the term Wild West thrown around a lot over the last 4 years to describe the NIL landscape. I think that's very accurate. There's, I think, more that we don't know the answer to than what we actually do know. So I am going to grab my popcorn and watch all of this unfold over the next 6 months with great interest because revenue sharing begins in the fall of 2025. Indiana Athletics, of course, operated at a deficit in 2024, largely because of the coaching firings with football. But they've eliminated 25 positions, which included laying off 12 or 13 people to prepare for rev share. And that's definitely not an isolated incident. That's something you're going to see more of around the country, especially, I think, in athletic departments that don't generate as much revenue as a program like Indiana does. I think it's just the reality. Hell, Ohio State even operated at a $20 million deficit, I think. And they won a national championship. They have over twice as many football seats to sell. Now, gate receipts aren't obviously all your revenue, but that was very surprising to hear Ohio State's deficit. But they also sponsor way more sports than Indiana does, and I think that's something to keep in mind as well. That's going to do it for this edition of IU Sports Sunday. The NBA All-Star break is right now, so there is no Pacers basketball for a little bit, although the Pacers have been on a roll lately. The Daytona 500 is supposed to start at 2, but as is the case every year with the Daytona 500, there is rain in the area, and it will probably be delayed after the green flag drops. They'll get some running in, and then it will probably sit. The cars will sit under tarps for a few hours. And that's not cool. That's not cool. Indiana men's basketball is off for a week. The women's team is in action on Thursday at Assembly Hall against Ohio State. Indiana baseball on at 2 o'clock today. And they play Oregon State, one of the best teams in the country. There's always the potential for chaos, though, in the world of college baseball. You've been listening to IU Sports Sunday. I've been Nick Rodecap. Have a good rest of your Sunday and try to stay warm because it's pretty cold outside.